do that. So I'm AnnaStout, and I own AstuteCommunications. We're a creative digital marketing agency. My background is in graphic design. I got my BFA from Watkins, and I'm a web designer and developer by trade. So our team is primarily made up of various producers. So whether that's designers, developers, content producers, digital marketers, but we've always really strongly invested in our production team and really built those strategic mindsets and taken that approach, the talent and skill that our team brings to the table. It's always been something I'm really, really proud of. We also have project management, and then me and my husband, who is also my business partner, do all of the account management still. So we're still very integrally involved in the business day to day and manage all of those client relationships.
Does that, do you feel like it's helpful that you guys are both in the same place, remote, that the kind of the account side is still able to kind of work very fluidly?
Yes, I think that that's definitely been an advantage. I am not a person who has ever really been that interested in like full-time remote work. I really love going into the office. I'm extroverted by nature, and I get a lot of energy from being around people. And I've always really enjoyed like having a place to go and being around the team. We do offer remote work days, in similar to like our PTO policy. We also have a remote work policy, but it's not usually everyone all at once for an extended period of time. So it's definitely been an adjustment with the team, but having me and Ryan able to work like actually together side by side has been beneficial for a lot of reasons, certainly from a communication standpoint and just from a support standpoint too. I think that it's just really hard to be alone and trying to get used to and define really what a new normal is going to look like. So I'm grateful for that.
Cool. Well, I have a few questions kind of around current economy and stuff like that, but I guess we'll go ahead and start. Brianna worked up a list of questions that we wanted to ask you today, and I'll let her kind of take lead on that and work through some questions. And I may interrupt with some of my own kind of to dig a little deeper, but I'll let her go ahead and move forward with the interview.
Yeah, so the first question we wanted to talk about was, how is your team kind of maneuvering its way through this time period? You know, is there any new tools that you've used? Is it harder to communicate during this time?
So I think from a technology standpoint, we really already had those pieces in place. And I'm so grateful for that, both for the work that's gone into various members of our team kind of creating that foundation, and also just for the people around the world who are developing the technologies that make this possible for us. But so there are definitely a lot of technologies we use. We use Asana for project management. That hasn't changed. We use Slack for communication, especially inter-office communication. That hasn't changed. We use Slack to communicate with one another really more than anything else. Even when people are sitting side by side, you'll see them, chatting that way. So that's pretty typical. We do daily stand-ups through an add-on for Slack as well called Stand Uply. And that was a decision that we made when we were still in the office full-time, because we were then, as we are now, really trying to answer the question about meetings, right? When do you meet? How many meetings is too many meetings? How many meetings is not enough meetings? And, wanting to make sure that we're communicating and interacting with one another, but not wasting anyone's time or preventing them from being productive. So Stand Uply has been a really great tool, and it's simple. It integrates seamlessly with Slack, and it just asks 3 questions every morning. What did you do yesterday? What are you working on today? And do you have any roadblocks or challenges? And so we're able to all touch base on that every morning. And that's a really good opportunity for anyone who has any challenges or anything that's preventing them from moving forward with their work, to be able to really kind of like raise their hand in a way, and everyone's sort of aware of it. So that's been a really valuable tool. We mostly use like Google Hangouts because we're in the, we have the Google Business Suite for our email and calendars and docs and, our Google Drive and everything. So we mostly use Hangouts for meetings. And I think those are kind of the big tools that I'm finding us utilizing a lot, but really in the same way that we were before.
So you guys didn't jump on the Zoom bandwagon as soon as you went remote.
We haven't, at least not yet. Although nearly everyone that I've spoken to is testing out their new Zoom account.
I feel like that was the one name you heard the most when everyone started going remote, was Zoom, trying to get up to speed with how much new business they had, and actually saying it was going to hurt them for how quickly they had to ramp up. It was interesting.
I've definitely seen that. In fact, I've used another service and I had a meeting scheduled in that first week that just didn't work. We couldn't get in for that reason, on a different platform. And then another product, I don't know, I don't want to like throw anybody under the bus, but I think that everyone was having this problem. So all that to say, just across 3 various platforms, I've seen and heard of just the overload.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it put out into a lot of industries too, like entertainment specifically. I know Hulu and Netflix both struggled to ramp up their services, and so yeah, I think it was kind of
how they've done it.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty crazy. I saw a report the other day that there were parts of America that there was internet outages because there's too many people on at the same time. It's pretty crazy. Right now, have you learned any productivity tips or tricks that you can give us during this time of working from home?
I think that we are still very much adjusting to the communication of it all. And so that's something that, from a productivity standpoint, I would say that we're just really still struggling with, or still learning about. I think that it hasn't presented any major problems, but I think we're all still just feeling the pain of growth a little bit and understanding what it means to grow in this direction. So we're reevaluating meetings that we have, meetings that we don't have, trying to figure out what other types of check-ins we need to be doing, or we could be doing to help with communication. Because one of the biggest things that I've seen is, or that I'm sort of aware of, I guess, is just that context that you have being in the office with one another. And I was talking to our project manager about this the other day, and just, sort of weaknesses on my part, even of like, when a change comes through, I'm not always super diligent about making sure I'm giving it to her directly, because I know that she's aware enough that she hears the conversations and she can pick it up and make sure that it's covered. And so recognizing that I'm going to have to be more diligent in that way, of passing information along, both to her and to the production team. Sorry, let me.
Okay. So is that a little bit of like
notifications?
trying to balance the verbal communication with the documentation?
Yes. And so that's definitely one of the things that we're doing is, rather than trying to schedule another meeting or another call, we've set between the leadership team and the management team, we'll have a weekly check-in, and we're setting a template for that of like, these are sort of the high level things that we need to make sure we're checking in on at least a weekly basis, right? So anything from shifting priorities on the client side to, internal business interests. This is something that is becoming more important to us. We really need to make sure we're making time for this. Please, communicate that to your team appropriately, and then also really thinking about how do we make sure that everyone has the appropriate amount of work, that nobody's getting just everything dumped on them and overworked because they have access, they're in front of their computer all day, and all night. And also that we're not leaving someone, kind of sitting around like, well, I don't really have a full workload, but I think that this is a little bit of a vulnerable time for a lot of people. And I want to make sure that I'm not putting anyone in a position where they feel unsure about, their future with our company, to the degree that I can.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I don't know what the future holds. If there's one thing we're learning, it's changing every day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that the productivity tips, I don't know. I mean, it's really all the same. It's really all the same things. It's just trying to figure out how to do it in a sort of a new way.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I know, like our agency, when we went remote fully, we weren't really ready for the creative department to go remote.
Yeah.
We didn't have cloud access to our files and stuff, because we all had worked from the office pretty much. And if we had one day when we randomly would work remotely, we would take files with us, pull them back, and then copy them back onto the server. So for us, what would they end up saying, and it sounds like you guys did something very similar, was nothing changes. Everything's the same.
Mm-hmm.
They got those server access set up, but that was the only thing that really changed, as far as I can still access the Finder, access my files. Like, nothing really changed. It's just now we, instead of walking to the person's office, we set up a Zoom call and we have a quick conversation in person, So that, I think that gave everybody a little bit of reassurance and like a little bit of calm that everything's going to be the way it has been, just at your home.
It's a weird thing to say, I think, especially from a leadership perspective, because that's true. And like I said before, and like you're saying, it is really important to me that that people know, like, we have a handle on this. We know what we're doing. We have all of the tools to be able to continue working successfully, and that's something that we can be really grateful for. Nothing has changed, except it's hard to say that, because I also have to acknowledge that everything has changed,
Yeah.
I mean, we're all really trying to figure out what this new normal is and what that looks like. And we don't know how long it's going to last. And I mean, what I'm finding is I stop myself short every time I start to say, when things get back to normal.
Right.
I'm like, I don't know. That feels like naive. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what back to normal is. I don't know what that's going to be like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could totally change our entire landscape of how we work after this.
Right. I mean, no one, you can't anticipate something like this. Schools being shut down for, months, right? Like, I have a first grader, and he's just not in school right now. Metro Nashville Public Schools doesn't have virtual learning set up. I will say that the school district and his teachers have been incredibly helpful, sending through resources. But this is another thing that's really relevant, I think, to the workforce, is that there are parents working from home who have their kids home with them all day, every day. And now they also sort of have, some parents to a larger degree than others, the responsibility of homeschooling. And that's weird.
Yeah.
So if you have any productivity tips for that, I'd love to hear.
So, I mean, I'll have to ask my mom. I was homeschooled my entire life. So being homeschooled and like seeing the craziness that happened like every day, like trying to manage, and of course there's 8 kids in my family, so trying to manage 8 kids, homeschool, and then, and dad worked his job, so he was gone all the time, but
probably better that way.
Just the management on all that was like, it sounds like with young kids, like you can't divvy out responsibilities to a 1-year-old, like,
right.
So that is a bit of a tough situation.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I was interested in the agency side that this is going to do is, maybe it's not back to the new normal, And maybe that's actually a positive thing for an agency. I know for ours, I think it's really helping us flex some and realize that working remote is not as scary on the creative side as it seems. It's just about implementing one new process, which is these virtual meetups.
Mm-hmm.
As far as nothing changing, I think I was really referring to like processes, like everything stayed the same process wise. But yeah, I mean, the environment, how you feel in that environment, completely different. So learning to stay focused. So maybe Brianna can mention some things about the productivity tips we were talking about yesterday that have helped us.
Yeah. So I have a girl that just started. She's a project manager at our company, and she had worked from home long term before she came over to direct. And she just gave these little tips that were like, when you wake up in the morning, go ahead and act like you're going to work, because that should be the mindset that you're in. So that can go ahead and get you in that space. And she was also saying, you know, don't do your work in a space that you wouldn't normally. So do your work either in like a home office or at your kitchen table, somewhere that space feels like close to what you would if you were in the office.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I mean, obviously there's a lot of that going around right now, a lot of blog posts, a lot of great resources, especially for people who are doing remote work for the first time. And I think that a lot of it is just like everything else. It works really well for some people. And for some people, it's just not, it either doesn't work as well or it's not as important. Hold on one second, they left the door open.
For example.
And I mean, the truth is, for me, I think as far as the, you know, getting up and getting started, starting your day in this specific way, a lot of times what's better for me is to just get up and get started instead of going through the process of, you know, I mean, getting ready takes a long time. And there are, frankly, a lot of things that can distract me in that time frame. And so if it's, you know, when it's coming down to like, okay, I need to get up and get my day started, sometimes the best thing for me to do is to roll out of bed and do that. I am absolutely learning about myself that I am one of those people who will show up to a video call in, you know, workout pants and a nice shirt and blazer.
Yeah.
You know, looking like I'm ready for my day. I do have on real pants now, but that's just because I've had a whole work day already. So I think more than anything, it's really about finding what works for you. And so that involves that exploration and learning from people who have done it before and seeing the different kinds of ways that people work. But for me, it's just about like, all right, what is it going to take for me today to get into the headspace to really just dig in? And that's not always the same for me. Sometimes doing it a little bit differently helps my brain really switch into productivity mode. So I don't know, different strokes, I guess.
Yeah. I'm kind of interested in that. So I've got a friend who, she's got kids, and so she's been struggling with this whole work from home thing, and, you know, schooling her son as well. I can't imagine what that could be like, to be like in the middle of a project and then also have to then get up and switch gears and go into mom mode. That's got to be so hard.
So I'm gonna let you in on my secret, which is, so we purchased an office in September of last year. We moved in October. Like I said, our office has been remote for the past 2.5 weeks, something like that. But our nanny is still, we do have a full-time nanny, because as I said before, my husband and I both work full-time on and in the business. And our nanny is still coming, and I'm still going to the office every day. I don't know how I would be doing this if I had to be home all day, every day. I'm not very good at focusing on my work and also being a reasonably decent mother. Those two people are kind of different people. And I think that it is a really important thing for us to be talking about, because I think that people severely underestimate how challenging it is to have your routine disrupted in that way, to have to be expected to do the same amount of work in the same way, have the same kind of availability. When you're in the situation, it's not realistic. And, I have this kind of other place where I can go and still be isolated and still socially distant, but most people don't have that.
Yeah.
And I really don't think I could. I don't know what would happen really, because I'm busy. I mean, and really grateful for that. But in our industry, especially on the digital side, if there's anything that people can do, it's digital. And so we're having a lot of urgent requests. We're doing a lot of work to help companies pivot and figure out how they can keep their businesses going. And it's really been kind of an all hands on situation. And I don't know how I would be accomplishing that if I couldn't really go and be somewhere quiet and focus on my work.
I know for me, I think Brianna's frozen up there, but I know for me, focus has been that really key thing is finding a way to find focus.
Yeah.
The only thing that I've figured out so far for me is writing that list up in the morning. We have a morning stand up as well, about the same, 10, 15 minutes. And we each talk about what we did yesterday, what we're going to do today. And we've just introduced the whole what walls we have and the things that we're going to struggle with or need help on. And so, but it's finding that focus that I think has been really hard. When I'm in the office, I'm in that mode. But when I'm at home, there's so many other things that, that you either need to do or want to do that kind of call out to you all day long. So,
And especially in a creative industry, when the work that you do is focused around that kind of thinking, I mean, the way that you get to creative thinking is through just working it out, right? Just getting in there, focusing, trying out different things, seeing what works, seeing what sparks, and so it's not like there's no real volume of mindless tasks, I think, in that kind of work. And so, finding your focus, that's the number one thing that you have to do, is figure out what can I do to get into a place where I can, I don't know, put some of the other things away for a while and focus on this thing.
Yeah. So I want to switch gears since Brianna kind of had the other questions set up, but question that I have for you is kind of related to the job market right now. I know a lot of recruiters are talking about that, but from an agency side, and you said you're really busy, assuming that you have so much work, like, are you, not necessarily you, but maybe talk about the industry in general. Do you feel like this is a time when there's going to be a lot of layoffs based off of the way that the economy and the market is going? Or do you think this is an opportunity where a lot of agencies will step up and really build out their teams to accommodate the fact that there's so much potential and need right now?
What's up? Do you need something? Okay. I'll come see you when I'm done, okay?
We're going to be outside.
Okay, sounds good.
I didn't hear the locks around.
Okay. Okay, so focus, right. The job market.
Yeah, so for a student looking at how do I become attractive to an agency who might be hiring or might be in a might be shrinking, like how do you become attractive with your skill set to find a job if we're talking about a negative economic impact on the agency world?
And I mean, I think that at this point, I do think it's probably pretty, I'm not an economist, but I think it's probably pretty undeniable that we're, looking at least some length of time with an economic downturn as a result. It doesn't make any sense to me that we could get through this without that. As far as layoffs go, that's certainly happening. That's certainly going to continue to happen. It's certainly something that I am, as a business owner, aware of, even though we're busy right now. What I don't know is what long-term effects could impact my business. And and I'm also, acutely aware of just how fortunate I am that in this situation, I happen to be in a business that can still operate. Both of my sisters are out of work right now, and through no fault of their own. It's just the nature of the businesses that they're in. So it's not all bleak though.
No, for sure not.
Because there are a lot of these essential services. There are a lot of industries, and especially being in Nashville, we do a lot of work in the healthcare industry, and all of our healthcare clients have to be speaking right now. They have a lot of responsibility. They are doing so much, and people are really looking to them for answers and to understand what's going on and what it looks like and what they should believe. And so being a resource to them, there's a huge opportunity there. And I think it's not just going to be in the agency world. I think there's going to be for designers and marketers and, and the types of careers we see in agencies. I think internal teams, are going to be needing a lot more of that. When you get into crisis communications and more sensitive situations and unprecedented situations, I said before, all hands on deck. And I think that there's really a lot of people looking for guidance, looking for expertise, and they're turning to consultants and agencies for that. But I also think that people are going to be acknowledging the need to strengthen their own teams and really have their own voice and be able to control their own situation a little bit more. So I do think that there's opportunity there. I think hiring is going to, it's happening. I'm seeing some openings. I think right now it's really, really tough. Even if you have the work to justify it, because we're so day to day.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the positive then. So you mentioned healthcare. That's an obvious area where if you're looking for work in a creative space, maybe look for agencies that are in the healthcare space or are in. So what other spaces right now do you think are needing to expand in order to help the people that are actually needing help right now?
Yeah. Gosh, I've been so focused on the healthcare industry, but the bigger thing that I'm seeing is those people whose businesses aren't essential services. What they're trying to do is pivot, and if they have the means to invest in that, then it doesn't really matter what they're doing. It matters a lot more about just okay, how much runway do we have to try to make this go in a different direction? Right. And those are the innovators, and those are the creative thinkers. And that's not just in one specific industry. And that's why I think I've seen a lot of people, I don't know, healthcare doesn't always seem like the most glamorous path. And I think, we have a mid-sized law firm that's been a client for many, many years. And they're still working. The courts are still open. They still have to go. And so we just have this incredible opportunity to actually directly impact the economy in a way that as a small business I've never felt before.
Yeah.
The opportunities are all around us. And I think that the most important advice that I can give to students, people starting their careers with regards to, really creating a positive outlook, is understand that the work that you're looking for is not, it doesn't always look like what you thought it was going to look like.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the most valuable skills that you can have is the ability to get excited about something and find what's really interesting and unique about it and show that to the world. And it's going to make you better at your job. It's going to make you enjoy your job more. And there's such an incredible value there. And I think that that's where the real opportunity is, because there's a lot of need right now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always a lot of need, but in the context of this conversation, I think that's really valuable.
So let me ask you this from a student perspective. If they are looking right now at the agency landscape, and let's say you're not hiring, you're an agency that's not hiring, but a student looking ahead long-term still feels like, man, your agency would be the place I'd want to be. How do they get attention while you're incredibly busy? Your agency is busy, you have a lot to do right now. So how does a student who might be trying to get in front of you gain the attention in such a busy time?
I think that's a really good question, because I know from my perspective, there have certainly been communications that I've received that have seemed pretty tone deaf, where it's like asking for something from me, asking for, and if that's my attention on their, their resume or whatever they're looking for. But then in the follow-up, there's a difference between persistence and insistence, I think. And persistence is something that I always appreciate. I think that it's a really important thing for people to have within themselves, is the ability to be persistent. You want to say hi?
Hi there. How are you?
But I also think that it's so important to understand and respect that the people you're contacting are also dealing with something that they've never dealt with before. And they're trying to figure that out, and they're trying to solve those problems. And so while on a typical day, I might advocate being a little bit more forward and being a little bit more pushy, I think at least for the time being today, I don't know what it's going to be like tomorrow, at least for the time being, I'm not saying don't follow up, but just be mindful of your approach, because a lot of what's happening right now is prioritization and really prioritizing essential communications and understanding even how I could, if I'm getting an inquiry from a student or a recent graduate, I don't really today even know how I could help them. And that's not to say that I can't. Like, stay in touch with me, definitely. I want to continue hearing from you, and continuing to hear from you, starting to build a relationship is going to be ultimately the best way for us to get to know each other and to see potential opportunities. But you can pretty well bet that whoever you're talking to right now is dealing with a lot of other questions, and just try to be sensitive to that.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll try to wrap it up here in a minute. I'm going to read, there's 2 comments that just came in that I'm going to read, and maybe you can respond to those. And it looks like we have another 3 minutes for the call. So Tyler Cowan Design says, maybe there is room for both agencies and freelancers to volunteer their services in an effort to help businesses communicate how they can help customers during a scary time. I think I've seen a lot of stuff on LinkedIn about that recently, where agencies are sharing lists of things that they're doing for their clients, and then allowing those lists of things to maybe inspire other small businesses to go. B-Band Co-Design says, would you set up an open agreement for whatever services you're providing, or have more of a set guideline just to not be taken advantage of, because some people might overwhelm you? Okay, that was actually in response to Tyler, but I guess if you're volunteering your services and time to
Yeah.
somebody, do you try to restrain that, or because you're trying to be helpful and maybe empathetic, or do you just leave that kind of wide open so that you can actually help them in whatever way they need?
That's a great question, and definitely something that we're facing right now. I think as a small business or as a freelancer, you have the benefit of moving quickly and of acting out of empathy. And I think that there are times when that's beautiful and can also be a huge advantage and in really nurturing relationships with people. But it does come with an inherent risk. And I think more than anything, the thing that's important is, let me back up. Under normal circumstances, always be very clear about the scope of work, what you're agreeing to, what's outside of that scope, get it in writing, make sure they look at it, sign it, understand it. Make sure they understand what it would cost if you're not charging them for it. Like, always do that. In this situation, I'm finding that, right or wrong, I'm becoming more lenient on that because I just see that I can help and I want to help.
Yeah.
And I can do that and I can feel okay about doing that because I know that I'm doing it with my eyes wide open. I know what decision I'm making, and I know that I have to be prepared if it gets to a point where it is too much. I have to be prepared that I can stop it and say, okay, that's too much.
Great. Well, I think it's going to probably kick us off here in a second. So, but I really appreciate you coming out and talking, Anna, about just your perspective on what's currently happening. And then maybe this is helpful to somebody with some advice about what they can do.
I hope so. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. All right.
And welcome any questions from anyone who sees this. So, yeah.
Okay. Yep. All righty. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Anna.
Awesome. Thanks.